What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show. So here we go again. We're talking about a stimulus check. This could be a $2,000 stimulus check. This is what President Trump is talking about. We're going to talk a little bit about this. And guess what? I asked AI, what's the probability of this actually happening? I wanted to see a percentage. And so that's what we have. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So first, I'm going to give you my opinion when it comes to this whole $2,000 stimulus check. And then AI is going to break it down and let us know are we going to see this or are we not going to see this? So that's what we're going to focus on in this video. But first off, if you guys can do me a favor, please like the video. And if you're watching this video and you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. Okay, so I've been on the road, actually in a plane for the last I won't say a couple of days, but about a day and a half. Now, I did have a cancellation. So for those of you who are thinking, okay, well, the government shutdown is going to be over, and so maybe they're not, maybe people are going back to work. I still had that cancellation. But everything worked out, and once I had that one cancellation, after that, it was smooth. I got to my destination, and I'm out in another country again, so that's why you see this brick wall, and this is actually real brick. You don't really get that too much, but a lot of times when you're traveling, I'm in South America, so when you travel out to South America, they use bricks a lot when they build buildings. So this is a real brick wall. Anyway. Going off on a tangent, let's go ahead and get started. I want to talk a little bit first about this $2,000 stimulus check. So we've been hearing about this, right? And President Trump has mentioned this again. First, he said there could be some type of a stimulus tariff. That's what he's talking about. He's going to take the revenue coming from tariffs, and he's going to use that to send out a stimulus check to a lot of individuals. Right now, I don't know if they've even really talked about who it would go to, but the reality is, Congress has to weigh in on this before it can even go anywhere. And so once Congress weighs in, then we could figure out exactly who it would go out to. This is just the president out there talking about a $2,000 stimulus check. Okay, that doesn't mean that it's going to go anywhere until Congress moves. Congress, they carry the purse. They have the money. And so they have to approve this. And so that's part of what I'm going to be talking about. But the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that President Trump has come out and talked about dividend checks. Remember that? Back during DOGE, when they were making all these cuts to different government agencies, the original goal was to save $2 trillion for the American people. Then they were going to take some of that money and send out a $5,000 dividend check to families. So that was the plan, right? Tax-paying families, you heard a lot about this, right? We heard about it for a couple of months, and then it went away. Now you don't hear about it anymore. And part of the reason you don't hear about it anymore is because there's no revenue to send out these dividend checks, because they started at $2 trillion, then they revised it down to $1 trillion. So they say, well, okay, we can save $1 trillion in government spending. And then they revised that back down to $150 billion. And so now, and this is the first time that I've looked at this in a long time, but this DOGE tracker is showing $214 billion. So they're saying that they were able to save $214 billion. Now, when it comes to those numbers, you've had people out there, you've had some press actually look into these numbers, and they can't find all of the money. So it might say $214 billion, but when you look at the deductions, it doesn't amount to $214 billion. It amounts to less. So we'll have to see. But right now, what they're saying is $214 billion. That's what they've been able to save so far. But did you hear about dividend checks? I haven't heard anything about dividend checks in a very, very long time. So I don't think that's going to be something that will be going out. And $214 billion is not nearly enough to even pay out these dividend checks. When you start looking at the numbers, it doesn't make sense. You're still going to have to borrow more money in order to pay out these dividend checks if you want to send them out in like $5,000 per household. Now, if you reduce it down, maybe you can send out $1,000 per household. I don't know, but you don't hear anything else about these whole dividend checks. Okay, now let's fast forward to actually a couple of months ago, we heard President Trump come out and say, you know, we should take some of the tariff revenue that we're pulling in, and we should send out stimulus checks. So that's initially what he said. He didn't say exact amount. He said it could be 1,000, it could be 2,000. Now, we just recently heard, just a few days ago, President Trump back out there saying, we want to send out $2,000 stimulus checks to the American people. Now, the reason why he is saying this is because he knows that tariffs are impacting everyone. And this whole affordability crisis, this is what you're hearing a lot about. And President Trump doesn't, he wants to try to send out some money to help families because he knows families are struggling, or at least he's now admitting that families are struggling, because if families weren't struggling, there'd be no need to send out these $2,000 checks. And so we'll have to see where this goes. But just look at recent history. He comes out, he talks about something, and he was on board with the dividend checks as well for Doge. So he comes out, he talks about that, then he stops talking about it. He's coming out, he's talking about these stimulus checks, and we'll have to see where that goes. Is he going to continue talking about it? Is it going to be something that we'll actually see? We don't know. Now, when we look at the numbers, and that's what AI did, and the good thing about AI is you can ask it simple questions. Give me the facts when it comes to a $2,000 stimulus check. Give me an unbiased analysis, and give me a percentage of, the probability of this happening. And that's what it did. And so we'll talk about that in a second. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Congress because I mentioned it earlier, but when it comes to Congress, right now, there's no support. You have Speaker Johnson saying he does not support. He didn't support dividend checks. He doesn't support a $2,000 stimulus check. And so in order for this to move, he's going to have to bring it to the floor. And so President Trump is going to have to convince him, hey, you should bring this to the floor. Now, when we start looking at the numbers, you're going to find out that there are going to be more Congress people that are going to be opposed to this because we're going to have to borrow money. And if you have to borrow money to pay a dividend check, you're going to have some Republicans that are going to have an issue with this, some fiscal hawks that don't want to move forward with borrowing more money to pay out stimulus checks. So those are the two things that I see right off the bat. First is that anytime there's an issue, anytime something's going on, President Trump says, okay, let's send out money. Send out money to farmers. Let's send out money to the American people. That is his solution. And so the whole thing is you're bringing in revenue coming from these tariffs, which the American people ultimately are paying for. And then you're going to say, okay, well, you know what? We'll give you a stimulus check as a result of that. And one more thing that you need to be careful of. Let's say President Trump is able to convince Congress to move forward with this $2,000 stimulus check. That will go out to the American people. The American people will get that $2,000. And guess what they're going to do? A lot of them are going to spend that money. And when you spend that money, that could potentially be inflationary, which means that the prices are high now. Guess what? They're going to go up even higher. And when you don't have more, the $2,000 is all gone, guess what? You're going to be left with higher prices. And all you got was $2,000 so you could make prices go up even higher. And so that's another problem. That's not going to solve the problem for a lot of people. People are still going to be struggling after that $2,000 is gone. We saw this during the pandemic. People were sent stimulus checks. And what did they do with the stimulus checks? A lot of people went out and they spent the money. And guess what? We saw inflation as a result of that. And we saw inflation in 2022 at its highest point, I think, over 40 years. And so it's a real danger when you start talking about, okay, we're going to send out stimulus checks, because it ultimately, in the long term, could have a negative effect on the same people that are receiving that money that really need that money. They're now going to have to start paying more. Okay, let's go ahead. I want to get over to AI. We'll see what AI says about this. And you're going to be shocked. Okay, here is the response from AI. So I asked AI a series of questions, mainly, what do you think about this $2,000 stimulus check? Give me your unbiased analysis on this topic. And this is what AI said. It says, Trump's $2,000 tariff rebate, the math behind it. President Trump has floated the idea of giving every American a $2,000 tariff rebate funded by money collected from import tariffs. Let's look at what's realistic using two possible revenue scenarios. Okay, so and this is what I had to actually train AI to do, because AI would just go to the default here, and the default was 195 billion. Now, the reason why I use 300 billion is because that's what we're hearing from the White House. The White House is saying that they think that they'll be able to bring in revenue from tariffs of about $300 billion. Now, not because we don't know if that's going to be true or not, but that's what they're saying. So I wanted to give you two scenarios. One scenario that's actually, when you're looking at the numbers, this is what's more realistic, the 195 billion, but the other option is the 300 billion. That's what the White House is talking about. So we're covering both bases there. So let's go ahead and go back. So let's look at scenario one. So this is a more aggressive estimate. Okay. It says $300 billion in tariff revenues, source, and this is where it's coming from, U.S. Treasury, Reuters, CBO projections. And then it says here, estimated total cost to give $2,000 to roughly 200 million adults. that would cost about $400 billion. $400 billion. Okay, when you start doing the math, the funding gap is $100 billion. So they wouldn't have enough money. You bring in $300 billion in tariff revenue, but then you would still need another $100 billion, which means you need to borrow $100 billion in order to pay out these stimulus checks. Guess what? You're going to have a lot of fiscally conservative Republicans that are not going to be on board for this. Okay, even before administrative costs. So there's going to be some other costs that will be involved. So just because you've been able to bring in $300 billion doesn't mean that that all that money can go to stimulus checks, because you're going to have administrative costs as well. Okay, and here it says the outcome. So it says it's possible if spread over multiple payments or combined with new borrowing and tax adjustments. So they're saying that you're going to need to borrow money basically in order to do this. Now, like I said, the whole reason for these tariffs, the whole reason for bringing in this revenue was to pay down the national debt. That was the reason for it. But if you take all of that money and send it out on a stimulus check, that defeats the purpose of bringing in the tariffs to begin with. That just means, if you think about it, that just means it didn't work. Because now, instead of paying down the debt, you're going to be in a situation where now you're sending money back to the American people. Now, one more thing that I should mention, when it comes to the tariff revenue, who else is supposed to get tariff revenue? Farmers. They were talking about sending out billions of dollars to farmers. Well, if you're taking all $300 billion and you're giving it to the American people and then some, because you're going to need more, then you're going to have no money left to go to farmers. So that's another issue. Okay, so the bottom line, if tariff collections really reach $300 billion, a partial or phased rebate could be conceivable, but still not fully funded without congressional approval or budget changes. Okay, and the congressional approval, remember, Congress has to weigh in on this. Okay, scenario 2, and this is a modest estimate, but this is what we're hearing about right now. $195 billion in tariff revenue. So if you're in that situation, and here are the sources here. If you're in that situation where you're bringing in $195 billion this year, estimated total costs, $400 billion, that's the same baseline. Funding gap, about $205 billion short. So that means you need to borrow $205 billion. The outcome would require major borrowing or cuts elsewhere. The rebate becomes more of a campaign concept than a realistic fiscal plan. And then the bottom line here, at $195 billion, the math still doesn't work. Tariff revenue covers less than half of what $2,000 checks would cost. Now we're going to get to the percentage, okay? And this is what AI is saying. So what AI is saying, if you were to send out $2,000 stimulus checks, the full check, we would be looking at about a 10% chance of this happening. A 10% chance. Okay, and it says direct cash payments to all or most Americans. And they're basically talking about the 200 million people. Okay, so modified rebate, tax credit. This is something else that we could see. Now remember, stimulus checks, that was a tax credit. It was a refundable tax credit. It was money that was advanced to you early. So that's something that we could see. Now in this situation, it would be smaller or income-based version tied to tariffs. About a 25% chance of that happening. And so you see, it's not very promising when we're talking about these stimulus checks. Now, you're hearing the president talk about it, and you'll probably continue to hear him talk about it, because anytime we have to talk about affordability, he's going to put that out there. Oh, well, we can send out stimulus checks. Or I don't know why Congress isn't sending out stimulus checks. But you have to understand that the probability of this happening is very low. And basically, you're going to need to borrow money to do it. And so you're not going to be paying off that national debt like the money was intended for. You're just going to be sending out stimulus checks. Now, another thing, and this is one last thing, when it comes to tariff revenue, it should be on hold right now. We shouldn't be sending out any money to anyone, because right now the Supreme Court is going over this case of tariffs and presidential power. Does the president have the power to say, this is a state of emergency and that's why we're raising these tariffs on all these different countries? Does the president have that power, or does it come from Congress? Because Congress holds the purse. They have the money. So they should be weighing in on this whole tariff issue. And so when the Supreme Court comes back, and they might not come back until June or July of 2026, when they come back, they could say this revenue that's coming in, all of the tariff revenue, you have to send it back. You have to send it back to these companies in the U.S., okay, these companies in the U.S. that are paying these tariffs when their products come to the U.S. So if they have to pay that money back, now you could be in a situation where you sent out $2,000 stimulus checks in the amount of $300 billion, so all of the money coming in from tariffs, and then you've borrowed another $100 billion to send out this money. And then on top of that, if Supreme Court rules that you have to pay it back, they're going to have to take all $300 billion and pay it back. It just doesn't make any sense. It wouldn't be smart to go ahead and move forward with stimulus checks if you're taking that money from tariff revenue right now. Because now if that money does have to be paid back, the money right now should be frozen. They shouldn't be doing anything with it. Because if the money has to be paid back, then guess what? Now you're deeper in the hole. And so I want to know what you guys think. What do you guys think about AI's prediction there when it comes to the percentage of the possibility of these stimulus checks going out? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye. So that's all we have for this video. Make sure if you guys want to send me an email, you can do that, david@thetecshow.com. Like the video, subscribe for more, and check out these videos over here for some more great content. Talk to you later. Bye.